Hey everyone, we're going to be doing a review of the Schecter C1 Exotic today. This is part of Schecter's Diamond series, and this is the ebony cap version of this guitar. There's another version of this guitar that has a maple cap. There's been a couple of reviews done on that already, but I haven't seen too many reviews done of this specific iteration of that guitar, which we're going to be doing today. I think the fairest and best way to do this review is to start out with the negatives before we move on to the positives. And it's because there aren't too many negatives actually with this guitar. Some of them might be my own personal experience with the guitar, but there are one or two issues with the guitar that I think might be deal breakers for some people. And I think it's worthwhile going over those immediately before continuing over to the positives. So let's start out with the negatives. Number one, Schecter are known, at least in the industry and at least amongst other music content creators and whatnot, that generally their guitars come in really high. Their standard of quality is pretty high, just out of the gates. So when you get the guitar, it's almost a case of it's ready just to take it on stage right away. If you were to take what I got on stage right away, not only would you be sorely disappointed, but everyone in the crowd would be as well. And that's because the setup on it was horrible. Which is really unfortunate because somebody had spent a lot of time setting the guitar up in its first place. This wasn't something that they just whacked together. They'd spent a good deal of time trying to get the action set to the lowest possible point it could possibly go. It was incredibly low. But it really begs the question, why did you bother when at the end of the day you end up with a guitar that sounds like a sitar and is actually unplayable, especially I played a D chord when I first got it, and I was like, what on earth is this? This is unacceptable. I know what the problem is. The neck needs to be readjusted. But just to be sure, I'll get my fret rocker out and I'll do a little bit of exploring on the fretboard to, test the fret alignment and all of that. And unfortunately, big quality control blunder. There were some high frets. So somebody had not actually sanded the frets down to be in alignment with each other. That was a problem, and I can't say whether that was directly responsible for the buzzing, because I did end up taking it to a guitar tech who managed to sort out the majority of the problems. There are still a couple of other problems we'll talk about in a moment. But there's no way that that level of quality control should not be picked up right away. And it's a bit worrisome actually, because it's not only from Schecter's end, it's also from the guitar store's end. So, quality control passed through Schecter. Somebody at Schecter went, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then that went to the guitar store, and then somebody at that guitar store equally said, that's fine. I have to argue, did anybody actually ever play the instrument in that period? Or did they just play like a real big lick going up here somewhere and just completely ignore to actually like, let's just play some chords? Maybe guitarists don't play chords anymore, who knows? But whatever was going through their brain, I have no idea. Somebody didn't do their job, or somebody did their job very badly. It's one or the other. It's a real pity because I know Schecter do have a very, very solid reputation in this area. This is just one case, and it might be my experience rather than somebody else's experience that they'll have, but I can only go on my experience here. This was a horror show in terms of just getting a guitar out of the gates. You at least want to be able to play the guitar out of the gates, not have something that is essentially unplayable. So let's continue with the negatives a bit here, and unfortunately the woes for this guitar don't end. The fret woes aren't over yet. If you were to buy a cheap guitar, what's notorious amongst cheap guitar are sharp fret ends. It's usually a case of the fret ends have been cut, sometimes poorly, and they haven't really been filed down or shaped in any specific way, leading to particularly nasty and sharp fret ends. It's something that can be resolved quite easily. Usually by a guitar tech who knows what they're doing would be the best advice there. This is very strange for this guitar, and I'll explain why now, is that somebody went through a great deal of time and effort to shape the fret ends. So if you were to look at the fret ends at this point of view, they all seem to be in, there seems to be a continuity there of actual shape. It's very well done, I might add. The problem is that they protrude quite a lot. They protrude more than is acceptable in my opinion. That amount of protrusion is not acceptable. That's It's not to the point where it becomes a problem for playing, but it's definitely something that's in my mind and will always be in my mind until it gets resolved. So at some point I will get the guitar tech to actually refile those and actually shape them how they should have been done. But the problem I have here, even though there are no sharp fret ends, is that somebody took the time and effort to actually file them and then polish them. But then for them to be all higgledy-piggledy aligned, and the amount of protrusion is different for each fret, it's really, really bizarre. Again, this could be my experience, but somebody wasn't doing their job here or didn't really pay much attention. And it shows a lack of pride in craftsmanship when that happens, which is a real pity, because what we'll find out in the rest of the review, there's a lot of craftsmanship in this guitar. A lot of love went into building this guitar. Why wasn't it shown on the fretboard though? I don't know. You know, not the fretboard, but the actual frets themselves. I don't know. It's highly frustrating and really disappointing, if I'm to be perfectly honest. Let's stick with the negatives because we don't have too many more negatives to talk about now. This next negative might be a complete deal breaker, and it's to do with the actual arrangement here, particularly the volume dial. Now, if you are a person that likes to play your guitar with your hand against the bridge, for example, you'll notice where my little finger is and where actually the rest of my fingers can quite easily access is the volume dial. The problem is, by having that approach to playing the guitar, your hand is literally resting on the volume dial because of where it is positioned. It's extremely close to the bridge and the pickup arrangement there. Now, if you do have a tremolo bar in there, that's probably not going to cause any problem. I don't have the tremolo bar actually fitted at the moment. I don't use it. So for me personally, it's not something I'm not really going to review something I don't actually use. So, but it works perfectly fine, so don't worry about that. That could be a real deal breaker, though, if you are somebody who plays off of the angle there. I personally play a little bit further in, so if you were just beyond the bridge pickup here, I play just off of that, and then my hand angles arches like this, so in that kind of an angle. To me, that's perfectly fine. As you can see, my hand is not in any way getting close to where the volume dial is. So for me personally, this isn't a problem. But if you're over here all of a sudden, that's a problem. Another potential issue is with the volume dial itself. It is quite sensitive. I really love the aesthetics of the volume dials, actually. It's a big plus for me. But the volume dial itself is quite sensitive, but it takes a while to actuate. And what do I mean by that? Even though it's quite sensitive to move, you have to actually move it quite a bit before you actually activate it. Which for me is great, because even in my playing position here, if I do accidentally knock the dial and it shifts a bit, it's not actually doing anything. But if you are somebody that wants to play with a lot of precision, and let's say you're playing in position 6 or something on the volume dial there, and you accidentally tap it now in that position, it's going to make that difference. It's just that if you want to have that in sort of inversely, you want to get that precision right out of the gates by just quickly dialing it down. Yeah, you're not actually getting that precision until it actuates, which is, I don't know, it could be a problem for some people. For me, it's no issue. I very rarely use the volume dial, actually. It's just how I've always been with guitars. The tone and the volume dials are not something I play around with a lot, but hey, that's just me. So let's now move on to pretty much everything that's positive. Everything from here in is positive in this video. So let's talk straight away about the actual, just the look of the guitar, the full visual appeal of this guitar. It's a beautiful looking guitar. I think the wood finish on it is just fantastic. It's right up my alley, this. So it's not everyone's aesthetic, but for me, they've nailed this perfectly. Big fan of it. Another beauty is the actual contours that they've used on this guitar. So the way that they've contoured the guitar is very, very, very well done. And yeah, I know a CNC machine did a lot of this, but whoever did the finishing sanding touches on this actually you can feel it when you run your hand across it. If anyone's familiar with woodworking, they actually put some effort into making sure there weren't any awkward spots there. So, for example, when you're running your hands across the curvature of the guitar and sort of where these contours are, you don't get any of that weird sort of like a rough spot or something that's bumpy. It's smoothed out perfectly throughout. It shows a pretty good amount of detail to craftsmanship there. So again, it's a real pity that they didn't do it with the fret ends. The only issue, I suppose, is with the shape of the contour here, particularly up here, and particularly if you're used to playing a Strat, because you would be used to the rolled effect that happens there. This has the opposite, actually. The contour ends up creating a lip right here, and that creates a sharp point. I would have actually put this into the negative category, but for me, it doesn't bother me that much. But then again, I haven't played too much with a t-shirt on, and I think perhaps there could be a case of your forearm rolling against there might be a problem later down the line. But for now, it certainly doesn't bother me, and I don't even know how you'd overcome that without completely changing the design and the contours of the guitar anyway. For me, the guitar looks beautiful. If you flip it over at the back, it's the same story. They haven't just spent all the time and effort in you know, shaping the top and making the top beautiful. The same amount of effort and attention to detail was spent on the body, the back of the body of the guitar. We will notice there is a bolt-on neck with actually 5 bolts instead of sort of what you would see in a Strat 4. That just gives you a bit more tension in the neck and a bit more chance, less chance actually, should I say, of there being any, like, I don't know, especially if you're quite heavy-handed and you don't want to push the guitar a lot against you, there's going to be a lot less movement in that neck. In fact, the neck itself, let me just turn the volume down there. The neck itself has a two carbon fiber rods that run right the way through it, and that gives it that little bit of extra stiffness as well, which is a pretty good thing. We'll talk a bit more about the neck in a moment. We'll leave the pickups till last, I think, for a little bit of a tone shootout or a little bit of a tone experiment. Talking of the bridge itself is a Wilkinson bridge, and I dig this Wilkinson bridge a lot. The tremolo, like I said, works fine, but I actually just like the simplicity, the simplistic look of it and the visual appearance of it. I think they got the colors here perfect, actually. This particular tone and this particular, I don't know, get it closer to the camera, that particular tone and that particular coloration. The only thing I don't like is the chrome here on yeah, these chrome things. I can't, words. I have no words at the moment. But those, yeah, you can aftermarket replace those. I personally don't like them. I think it doesn't. They should have matched the color of the bridge and this together, and they would have looked much better. But hey, as far as the cut goes here, in terms of the body, you get access to the high frets perfectly. Not a problem at all. Nice, easy guitar to pick up with one hand. That's also very cool. The strap here works perfectly. I'm not going to demonstrate the strap, but there's no strap dive or anything like that, so that's always a good thing. As we move on to the neck, with the excusing the frets, the fret cuts and the potentially uneven frets, there are no scratchy frets, so somebody has spent a good amount of time polishing them to make sure that is the case. The neck feel is what's called a slim C. If you've played a Strat, you'll be very familiar with the C shape, of course. To me, this feels a lot closer to a Strat than something like the Ibanez down there, which is a wider and a fatter neck. This does feel a bit like a Strat to me, but there are a couple of differences. For my hand shape, so my hand size, this feels ideal. Like, of all the guitars I've played and owned in the past, this is probably my favorite neck profile. So I think I've gotten quite lucky with finding a guitar that if any future guitar, I'd be like, yeah, that's what I'm after, that neck shape. The satin finish that they've got in this neck, so the way that they've sanded this finish down and sort of put it on as well, it's silky smooth. Like, I know that type of feeling's not to everyone's taste, but for me, it's just ideal. I can't think of a neck feel that I would, in other words, what I'm trying to get at, this is probably the nicest feeling neck of any guitar I've played, actually, and that says a lot. And it's not just for the feeling of it. If I'm to move my hand up here to sort of do a nice an E chord, for example, you notice where my thumb is sort of arcing off in that direction, the way that my hand is sort of resting up against where the headstock meets sort of the edge of the fretboard here, is very, very well tapered in. There's no sharp points for where my hand hits the nut here at all, so they paid a good amount of attention of how to address that. Some guitars have that issue. Yeah, really well done. Speaking of the headstock here, I'm a big fan of the headstock design. I like that a lot. The tuners. So what's the difference? These have locking tuners, but what I'm trying to get at here is I don't really know what the difference is between, say, a moderately priced pair of locking tuners and sort of what I've got on the Strat up there, which is quite an expensive pair of locking tuners. To be honest with you, I only have one concern. Well, two actually, when it comes to tuners. Number one, does it keep the guitar in tune? If it does, success. And does it look nice? Does it suit the actual guitar itself? And in this case, Schecter have knocked this out the park. These aesthetically are very pleasing for the actual sort of the rest of the guitar if you put it together. They don't look out of place at all. Both in shape, design, and color, all perfect. But beyond that, the tuners work absolutely phenomenally. I have no problem. This guitar stays in tune perfectly well. Whether I'm playing pretty heavy or playing sort of light touch, doesn't matter. Even I haven't done too much detuning on this guitar. Probably the lowest I've gone really is just drop D, but so far so good. And it has a double action truss rod in there. Again, I didn't actually mess around with that. The guitar tech did when I had them set it up. He did actually make a comment, and I suppose this is a good thing. He said it's quite easy to become very precise with this guitar in terms of setting it up. So in his opinion, that was a good thing. So I'll take his word on it. I don't know much about that, but yeah, the guitar, the intonation and everything like that after guitar setup is great. Let's talk about the fretboard. The fretboard is a great fretboard. But beyond that, it looks really beautiful. I absolutely love the look of this fretboard. I've always wanted a vine design, and I've always avoided a vine design for a couple of reasons we're going to go over now. Number one, whoever designed this specific pattern, buy them a drink or, a coffee or, I don't know, something nice, because they did a really good job of just visually being very appealing. It's something you can't really see that well until you shine it into a light of the various different color patterns that they've managed to embed in here. It's quite beautiful. But practically, there's some very, very good practical attention here with this design. So I'm a visual guitarist, actually. I can play blind. I can play in a dark room, for example. I can do all of those things, but how I tend to play is I like to have a quick little visual representation of where I am on the fretboard sometimes. Now, if I have a strap, I will look down at the dots at the very top to get an idea of where I am. But when I'm sitting and playing, I often just look at the fretboard. And my concern with some vine designs that have been sort of implemented in other guitars is that the continuous design actually creates a very distraction. So it distracts me, it confuses, and it disorientates to some point. And even though it looks visually very nice, for me personally, as the type of guitarist I am, I haven't found it very ideal. It's not the optimal playing experience for me. What Schecter have done very cleverly here, and they're not unique in this type of design, I will make that quite clear, but the appointment of the dots here are very well positioned. And they stand out so well, is what I'm trying to get at. And it's on the 5th, the 9th, and the 17th, which are the most important markers for you actually to sort of get your orientation quite quickly. But it's beyond just the fret markers themselves. There's actually 3 vine designs going along the whole fretboard. So that doesn't create a continuous vine effect. There's actually a break in the vine. So your eye doesn't necessarily get lost in the vine when you're looking at its design, which I think is practically very, very clever, actually. So visually, I love the vine design, but from a practical perspective, it's also they've got enough attention to detail there for a guitarist who is visual will not get lost. So top marks there. Right, let's now talk about the actual pickups themselves. These are Diamond Specials, 78s or something. I don't know what that means. It's a split coil system, so you can put it into single coil and humbucker mode. I did read when I was doing some research on this guitar to begin with that some people are asking on how do you tell the difference between what is split coil and what is, in the humbucker. And there are a couple of responses that either weren't that useful or were quite degrading, I found, for those particular individuals. If you're going to comment and somebody's asking you something, at least give them useful information. You don't degrade them. Not everyone has a frame of reference to be able to tell what a Strat sound is versus what a non-Strat sound, like a full-fledged humbucker sound is. Not everyone has that frame of reference. So, the easiest way for this guitar is it's up for single coil, it's down for the humbucker. If there is a particular guitar that isn't this guitar and you want to be able to tell the difference, coming out with terms and descriptions like fatter sound, louder sound, it doesn't really help, to be honest. The easiest way to tell whether it's a single coil, stick on a whole bunch of high gain, flip it into one or the other. Whichever has the most amount of buzz in the background, it's probably a good chance that that is the single coil. And that's, really if you're unable to tell the difference. In other words, you don't have a frame of reference before. So let's hear what it sounds like. We'll start off in the single coil mode. So we're on the bridge pickup at the moment. Let's go mid. Go high. Yeah, really cool. Let's go into the humbucker mode. We're at the neck pickup. Yeah, really cool. Both sound fantastic. Just a general comment though, the single coil doesn't sound like a Strat in my opinion. That's not a bad thing, but if you are looking for a Strat in a guitar setup like this, I don't think you'll be that impressed with the Strat sound, because it's kind of its own thing, and I think that's a good thing. For me personally, it's a great thing because I have a Stratocaster over there, so to have a different sound opportunity to, construct different types of sounds, I find it really nice that we have a very nice pickup setup here, I actually quite like the mid pickup for this. It sounds pretty cool. Really cool. And then I mean, one of the nice things about this, the way this is arranged, it's actually really easy just to really easy to flip between it, you know, no problem at all. There's no grinding sound either. None of the pickups have any grinds in them. Really, really good attention to detail there. As far as the tone sounds, I really like this guitar. You can actually set quite a lot of tone parameters on there, so you can be really creative with just a couple of flips of a finger here to get different tones on the fly without having to resort to sort of pedals or something like that. It's more creative opportunities. Just to reiterate a point though, if you are going directly into if you're trying to compare it to a Strat and its Strat sound, I don't think that's quite accurate. It's its own sound, which is cool. As far as playing high gain stuff, I don't really do high gain stuff, but in my previous testing, the high gain on this sounds perfectly fine. You can get some pretty decent chugs on here without it sort of bottoming out, which can be a bit of a problem with a guitar where the pickups aren't hot enough, for example. There's no problem there. Overall, would I recommend this guitar to other people? Yes, I would. I would recommend you go and play it, as always, because I think that volume dial could be a universal problem for quite a lot of people. So buying this guitar blind, I mean, sure, but if it's a case of that volume dial is going to be a problem, then you might want to consider sending it back straight away, because, you know, you shouldn't fight a guitar. I think that's ultimately what I want to get at here. You don't want to be fighting the guitar. I'm not fighting this guitar anymore at all, especially now that the action's properly adjusted, and eventually when I do get around to having these fret ends sorted properly, this is a guitar that I'll, you know, treasure for many, many years to come. So I'm very happy with that. As always, this is just my opinion. This is just my experience of this guitar. Do with it as you will, and I'll see you next time.